Jessie from Plaid, and we are here with Let's Paint Live, and it's actually a special edition. We had to postpone last week, and we still wanted to be able to paint along with you, so we're actually going to be doing a watch party this evening. So we won't be live, but we will be interacting with you, so comment and ask questions, and we'll be on Facebook chatting with you. So we'll still be painting. Jessie's going to be teaching you in just about an hour how to paint sunflower fields. And again, don't forget to comment, question, and like everything that we're doing, because we'll still be there and we want to see where you're painting from if you have any questions. Also, if you comment while we're hosting our watch party, you're going to be entered to win our Let's Paint Live kit, which is a brand new kit that we put together for this year. It includes 24 folk art paints that Jessie will be using throughout the year to do our Paint Night Live paintings. So she'll be selecting colors from that palette every month to paint with. So go ahead and either click the link below or you comment to be entered to win our Let's Paint Live kit. So again, if you are enjoying our Let's Paint Live and you've painted along with us before, don't forget to check out plaidonline.com Let's Paint. We have a ton of online education with Donna Dewberry, Andy Jones, Jessie's on there, Priscilla Hauser. We're getting ready to launch some brand new content for 2020 in March with Andy Jones, so you want to stay tuned and check that out. Also, we have a great Facebook group, our Let's Paint Facebook group. We're constantly interacting and sharing, and we want to see what everybody out there is creating. So that's a really great way to connect with Plaid and all our artists here. So again, Jessie's going to be teaching how to paint sunflower fields in just about an hour. We are not live, but we will be chatting and commenting with everybody. So, go ahead, hit the like button, click the link below to purchase the product, and it's just like we're really here live, but we're doing a watch party. So we hope everybody enjoys. I'll check back in with you when you're getting close to finishing up. So enjoy, everybody.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to start by letting you guys know what our supplies will be for tonight. I've got here a 12 by 12 wood canvas. This is a great surface. We use it a lot for our Let's Paint Lives. I've got some palette paper, some paper towels, a water basin, and then I've also got our 10-piece variety brush set that is included in the Let's Paint Live kit that Kira just mentioned. And now I'll go over which folk art acrylic paints will be used. So we've got aqua, coffee bean, daffodil yellow, navy blue, wicker white, cinnamon, and then last we've got pure orange. And like Kira said just a minute ago, these are all included in the Let's Paint Live kit. So if you purchase that kit, you'll have these colors as well as all the colors we'll be using for future paintings for Let's Paint Live. Okay, so let's get started. So to start off, I'm going to grab my round brush. Let's see here. We'll go ahead and grab this guy. This is our number 1 liner brush. And I'm going to get it wet because this is a brand new brush. I just want to wash off that sizing. I'm going to wet it and then dry it off. And then I'm going to put some cinnamon onto my palette. I don't need a lot, probably just about a dime or nickel sized amount. And I'm going to water this down because we are going to use this almost as a pen and ink sort of consistency, as a technique I should say, to sort of sketch out our sunflower. Okay, so the first shape that we're going to draw is we are going to draw our sort of center of our bottom left sunflower here. So I think Lindsay maybe has the picture screen, I'm not sure, I'll show you anyway. We're going to be drawing this circle right here. So we're just going to do sort of sketch a circle. If it's more watered down, it's easier to cover up. It'll soak right into the wood, so it'll flow a little better with a little bit more water. So just a rough circle, not too big, just the bottom left corner. And it doesn't quite fill up. If you were to cut this into 4 pieces, it doesn't quite fill up that square. It's a little bit smaller than that to give you an idea of size. So if you're doing a smaller canvas, that can kind of give you an idea of how big the center of your sunflower should be. So just a rough circle. You can see it's not perfect. I just kind of wanted to lay that shape down. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw, we've got sort of a corner of the center up here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sort of draw that in. So I'm just going to do sort of the corner of the circle so you can see here. Just sort of like a wedge shape right in the corner there. And that'll be for our other sunflower. Okay. So the next thing we're going to sketch in is the spacing for our flower petals. So the way I did this to help make it easy for you guys at home is I'm going to make sort of little notch marks, kind of like this, you can see in my palette, sort of like quotation marks all around the outside of our flower center so you can see the spacing pretty well. So here I'll show you. So I'm going to make a couple notches here, notch, notch, and this is going to be the space between our flowers. And I'm going to go about an inch. You can kind of use your thumb as a guide. Notch, notch, use my thumb. You see what I'm doing there? And that'll help you get really evenly spaced petals to make your flower look more realistic, because flowers are generally pretty symmetrical. They're usually pretty evenly spaced. This is kind of a good guide to use. And I think if they're a little bit further or a little bit closer together than mine are, that's fine, as long as yours are even with each other. They don't have to be just like mine. And then we'll kind of do, okay. So you can see we've got our notches going all the way around the flower center, and that's going to be the spacing for our petals. So I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to do a couple notches here, and then I'll put my thumb down. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to start drawing in our flower petals. So don't be intimidated by this, because, you know, we're kind of just sketching this out now. So if you don't like it, you can always just paint right over whatever it is that you draw. But here, I'll show you the shape that we're going to make it. We're going to start at one of these notches. So this here, this space, is going to be the base of our flower petal. So I'm going to go up, and it's almost sort of like a diamond shape that we're going to be doing. I'm going to go out, and then I'm going to come back and meet it at the top. So you can see that shape there. It's sort of like I said, it's sort of like a diamond shape. It kind of goes, it's longer at the bottom, and then it sort of points at the top. And we're going to try to keep these about the same size going all the way around. It almost looks sort of like a necktie, I guess. That's kind of the shape that it's going to end up looking like for each of these petals. And if you feel like you want yours to be a little bit closer together, feel free to make yours closer together. Or if you want them to be further apart, that's totally fine. However you think that your flower looks best. And we're just kind of sketching this in. We can go back and paint it and change it any way that we need. Just really gently, sort of quickly sketching this in. It does not need to be perfect. And this is just the top layer of our petals. We are going to put some more petals behind these to kind of fill in our flower. So that's why there's some spacing between. That's okay. Just sort of finish out these lines. It looks like there's petals going off the canvas. And then we're going to do the same thing. Actually, let's do these behind petals first, because those will be in the front. And then we'll go back and do our partial flower. So all we're going to do for the petals between is we're just going to draw some petals in between each of these. So we'll kind of do a point here, just to look like our flower is really full and has a lot of petals. You can see I'm really just loosely sketching it in. You can take as much time as you need doing this. All right, so now we've got a nice full sunflower shape. We are going to go and do this sunflower up here. Just draw in those petals. So we're going to do the same thing we did. And so you'll see we're going to bump right up to our flower in the foreground. So we're just going to kind of try to draw around it. Imagine what the petals will look behind it. And I really like this way of sketching out my compositions, because it's really flat, so I can paint over it and it doesn't leave bumps. It's really easy to cover up. and I can kind of get a loose idea of what I want my painting to look like before I really start painting it. Okay. So we want our composition to look something like this. It should look similar to how mine looks. So you've got our big flower here with our first row of petals, and then our petals behind. And we've got our smaller flower sort of in the background with just a few petals showing. Okay, so I'm going to clean off my liner brush, and I'm going to switch over to my number 12 flat brush. So again, I'm going to get it wet because these brushes are brand new. And I'm going to dry it off, and I'm going to put about maybe a quarter-sized amount of coffee bean. This is like kind of our darker brown color. So we are going to start painting the centers of our flowers. And the reason we're doing that next is so that when we go back to paint our flower petals yellow, we can kind of cover up that space to make it look like the petals are growing out of the center. So I'm going to put some coffee bean onto my brush, and I'm just going to fill in this area using a dabbing motion to create some texture. So you can kind of move the canvas however is comfortable for you, but I'll kind of show you how I'm going to do. We're just going to do a dabbing motion. We want a good amount of paint on there because we're going to do some blending with it. We're going to blend some other colors into it. And we're not going to have a perfect edge because, of course, of the way that we're painting it, the way we're dabbing it, we're not going to be able to have a perfectly clean edge, which is fine. That's the way we want it because the center of sunflowers are pretty textured. So we're just going to get up as close as we can to those edges while doing our dabbing motion. So we're just going to fill it in using this motion. We've got a good amount of paint on there. And just really loosely dabbing. Just going right up to the edges. Filling in that flower center. So now it should be totally brown. We're just going to do this thing for this flower center up here in the top corner. So now we've got those totally filled in. I'm not going to clean my brush off just yet. I'm going to get some daffodil yellow, pure orange, and navy blue. And I'm going to go ahead and put those all on my palette right now. So just grab a little bit of each. Like I said, I've got daffodil yellow. We're going to try to blend these in while the brown is a little bit wet. So that's why we're putting them all down at the same time. Pure orange. Just got about a dime-sized amount. And then navy blue. These paints are really nice and thick. They have really great coverage. I love these folk art acrylics. So you can see I didn't clean off my brush, but I'm going to wipe some of it off. And I'm going to pick up some orange, just a little bit of the pure orange, and I'm going to do a dabbing motion around to make another ring in the center of this. And that's going to create the center of sunflowers have sort of like a peak. They kind of come up and then they dip back down in the center. So that's going to give it some dimension and give us that shape that we want. So I'm just going to put some orange in there. Not a ton. My brown is still wet. I just want to be able to see a little bit of that orange coming through to give it sort of some highlights and make it look like there's sort of a ring of texture that has risen out of that sunflower center. So there's my orange, and then I'm going to wipe off my brush, try to get most of it off, but not putting it in water yet. And I'm going to grab some yellow, and I just want a little bit of yellow, so I'm just going to put in a touch here and there. You can see I'm not doing a full ring, just a little bit here and there. And then I'm going to wipe it off again. Make sure you wipe it off pretty well. We're not going to get all that brown out, but that's okay. And then I'm going to take this navy blue, and this is going to go into the middle. So when you add the blue to the brown, it'll just really make the brown a lot darker and deeper. So it'll look kind of like a shadow. And we don't want to go straight up to the ring we just made. We're just going to make a little bit of a dark area in the center there. We're going to do the same for the top flower. So it should look something like that right now. I'm going to wipe off my brush again on my paper towel, still not putting it in water. And I'm going to go back and coffee bean. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm kind of going to go ahead and dab around the edges, doing a similar motion that we did to lay that first layer of paint down. And if you feel like you're picking up a lot of other colors and smearing them around, you can give it a quick wipe on your paper towel and then go back and continue blending it. We want to work a little bit quickly. Maybe this is going a little fast for you guys, but that's because we want to be able to blend these together while all of our paints are still wet. And these paints dry pretty quickly because they're acrylic, so we just want to make sure that we are getting those colors nice and blended. So I'm going to go around the center too. I'm kind of not going directly over those colors. I'm kind of going on the outer and inner edge, just blending them into the brown. You can see I'm just sort of blending it, and I'm trying to keep that nice ring shape that we've made. I'm blending that blue in. There we go. I'm going to do the same for this top flower center. I'm just wiping off any excess color that I got on my brush. So it's nice and blended. Okay, and you can see it kind of looks like the flower peaks and then dips again into the center. So I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush off. Okay, so my brush is nice and clean now. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start filling in the petals with our daffodil yellow. So all we're going to do now is we're just going to put the color in, sort of like a coloring book. We're just going to sort of fill in these shapes that we created. We don't want to go completely over these lines because we want to be able to see where one petal stops and the other begins. So we're just going to try to go right up to the lines, just filling in these petals with yellow. So we're just still painting yellow here. So this is going to take a minute, so hopefully if I lost any of you guys, if you guys are painting along with me during the sketching or during the painting of the centers, this will give you guys a chance to catch up. This is going to take a few minutes just to fill in all of these beautiful flower petals that we've sketched in here. And if you need to add more yellow to your palette, go ahead and do that. I just ran out. And again, we're using daffodil yellow, and this is folk art acrylic paint. So we're not going over the lines that we painted. We're not going over the cinnamon lines that we painted earlier. We're just going right up to them. And if you get it a little bit over the edge, don't even worry about it. If it's not perfect, if it's not the shape that you had intended when you go to fill it in, that's totally fine because we're going to be adding a lot of layers to these petals. So do not stress. Hopefully you're painting at home, you're relaxing, or having some me time, or spending some time with family and friends. This is supposed to be fun. Just going right up to the edges. It's really starting to look like a flower now, so this is kind of a fun part. Bright, sunny sunflower, getting ready for spring. Just going right up to the edges. And again, if you're just joining us, we are using our number 12 flat brush still, and we are using daffodil yellow, and these are our folk art acrylic paints. And you can purchase all of these paints in a kit, in our new Let's Paint Live kit. So that way we're going to be picking colors from this kit through the rest of the year, and you can paint along with us. You'll always have the paints that you need each month to paint along. Just making sure I got some yellow in there, making it messier. So between here, there'd be yellow petals as well, the petals in the distance behind these flowers. So make sure we get yellow in there too. We're just filling this in. Sort of getting that base color down before we go and we add some more dimension to these petals. So I've got my flower in the foreground painted in. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to fill in these petals in the back. This is kind of a fun, mindless part of painting. It's just sort of filling in where you've drawn. Just sort of relaxing and not really thinking about it. Okay, so you can see here we've got these spaces between these petals on our flower in the background. So we're going to paint those in yellow too, because just like our flower in the foreground, there would be petals behind those as well. There wouldn't just be one layer of petals. So we want to make sure that even though we can't really see where those end because it's behind this flower, we know that they are there. So we want to make sure we fill that in with yellow too. It should really all be filled in with yellow all in this area because it would just be sort of a big full cluster of petals. Okay. All right. So we talked about earlier, we painted the brown first so that we can sort of bring the yellow over the brown and make sure that it looks like the petals are growing out of the center. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going to push the yellow a little bit right at the base of each petal into the brown. Not a ton, just a little bit so that it overlaps ever so slightly, and you can see that the flowers are growing out of it. And you can see I got a little bit of brown in my yellow there. That's okay, because we're going to go back and we're going to add a lot of shading and shadowing to these petals anyway, so that's okay. Don't worry about that. Just carrying down my petals ever so slightly so that they're overlapping that brown part, and it looks like it's sort of growing out of that dimensional center. Just gives it a little bit more realism. Just bring it down, probably 1/4 of an inch, not much at all. You can see it makes it look more real already. It looks like the flowers in the foreground are growing out, and then the ones behind it are growing out a little bit further back. We'll do the same thing for our flower here in the background, just bringing them down the front petals ever so slightly. Okay, so it should look a little bit something like this now. So I'm not going to wash my brush off yet. I am going to start adding some dimension and some more color to these, some more layers of color to these petals. So I still have the daffodil yellow on my brush. This is still my number 12 flat brush. And I'm going to pick up some of my pure orange. And I'm going to mix that a little bit on my palette. So this is going to give me sort of a nice tangerine-y, yellowy orange sort of color. And I'm not going to mix it all the way. You can see it's a little bit streaky. It's not completely combined. And I'm just going to use this to add some really quick little brush strokes to the base of these petals of this pretty orange color. And this just adds some more layers of color. Mix a little more if you need to. And they're kind of mixing together on my canvas as well, creating sort of a pretty layered brushstroke effect. And if you feel like you got too much orange, go ahead and put some more yellow back in there. We're just going to add some more dimension to these petals. I'm just going to do the same thing, kind of just pulling out from the base for all of these petals. And this is the time where you're probably going to want to start going out to the sides a little bit and maybe covering up a little more of that brown. But we're going to continue doing that as we paint on these petals. So you can see I've got lots of brown areas there, so I'm just going to bring it out to the edge a little just to cover that up a little bit more. But it should blend in. When all is said and done, you won't be seeing any of that brown anyway. And I'm going to do the same thing to our flower in the top right, in the background there. Just adding some more color. Just to our petals in the foreground for now. So we're going to kind of make our petals in the foreground, sort of our top layer of petals, really warm. And then the petals in the back are going to be a little bit cooler, and that's going to give it more dimension so you can see the different planes of petals in the flower. So you'll see as we go, but that's kind of the plan for now. If you're wondering why we're not adding any of this orange color shading to those background petals, if you're thinking, oh, well, those should have more shadow than the foreground ones, that's kind of why. We're gonna put a different color on those to make sure they really stand apart from these petals on top. So I've got a lot of orange there. I'm just gonna put some more yellow and blend that. And again, I haven't cleaned my brush off yet. I'm still just using the same brush. I haven't put it in water. Just sort of gently blending that in a little bit more. Just picking up yellow right now, just blending in that orange. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush now because I'm going to pick up a totally new color and I don't want it to get muddy or brown when I start mixing colors that aren't similar. Just want to get it nice and clean, get all of that daffodil yellow off. Draw off my brush, and I'm going to refresh my paper towel. So now I'm going to pick up mostly daffodil yellow. You can see I have a good amount on my brush. And then I'm going to pick up the tiniest little corner of my brush. I'm going to put into the navy blue. You can see there's hardly any paint on there. And I'm going to mix those two together to get sort of a greenish sort of color. A tiny bit more blue. You can see I have sort of like a citron color now. Put as much blue as you feel like you need to get sort of this like yellow, very yellowy citron, more yellow than green for sure. And we're going to add these to the petals in the background, like we said before. So you can try to remember which ones are in the foreground, and then these ones were the ones that were in the background, the ones that we drew in after the fact. So we're going to add some of this into the background to just put these petals in shadow and make them look like they're further away than our orange shadowed petals. And again, this is the time to start going right up against each other to really clarify which petals are which, and so we can cover up that cinnamon sketch we did earlier. So feel free to mix some more if you need it. If you feel like it needs to be a little darker, go ahead and add some more navy. If you feel like yours is way too blue or green, then you can just put some more yellow in. But we're just going to add this to these petals in the back, just starting at the bottom and going out to really distinguish the foreground petals from the background petals. Just gonna mix a little bit more because I feel like I'm running out. Don't forget these little areas at the bottom down here because there'd be petals behind there too. I'm going to do the same thing for these petals. We kind of just have a little bit showing up here in this background flower. Just sort of putting some of this shadow color in. Okay, so now just like we did before, you can go ahead and wipe this off, and if you feel like you need to blend some yellow into it, if you feel like maybe it's a little streaky or it didn't blend as nicely, now's the time. We're just going to sort of blend those out a little bit. And if you feel like you want yours to be a little bit darker, you can go ahead and add some more blue in there too, which I might do actually. Let's put a little more blue in there because I feel like they're still a little bit close. So I'm going to mix some more of this green color. You can see it's a little darker than I had before because I've decided I want it to be a little bit darker. So let's do that. So some more darkness in the base of here to really differentiate the different layers of petals. See, I'm being really loose and really quick with it. This is just sort of a fun, loose painting. Now I'm going to wipe off my brush again. And I'm going to blend in the yellow, the daffodil yellow. Okay. So it kind of looks like we've got the foreground petals, and we've got the background petals, but to me these two flowers look like they're kind of on the same plane, when really this one should be in the front and this one should be in the back. So let's go ahead and add some more blue to this one to make it look like it's more in the distance. So here, I'll show you how we can do that. I'm going to get some navy, and I'm going to grab some more daffodil yellow. This is our folk art acrylic paints. And I'm going to mix it in with our blue. It doesn't need to be fully mixed because we can do some mixing on the canvas too. And I'm just going to add some sort of shadow areas behind these petals. I want to make sure you can distinguish between, these are getting a little bit lost together. They're getting a little bit mixed up. So you can kind of start by sort of outlining for yourself where those petals, as you can see there, and then we'll blend those in together so that it doesn't look like such a harsh line. We don't want it to look like it's outlined. We just want, this is for us to know, to sort of redistinguish where one petal starts and the other one ends. That's all I'm doing there, just for myself. I don't want any of these petals to get lost. Okay. So we can kind of see now, we've got a better idea of where all of these petals are beginning and ending. So we can kind of just blend these out to create some shadows. So keep in mind which petal you're painting on. So I'm on this guy now. So I'm creating some shadows behind him. And I'm going to kind of go one petal at a time. So I'm creating shadow on him. Now I'm going to wipe off my brush and I'm going to blend in some yellow because I don't want it to get too green. I want him to still appear to be yellow. The green will be the shadow, so that's okay. But I still want him to be bright. So I'm going to blend that in. But you can see now we have a nice shadow behind this petal here. And I'm going to kind of do that with each of the petals. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow here, just so we know that he is in the background. We know that he's not one of our petals on top. I'm just going to blend that in. See how I did that there? You can see that this flower is sort of casting shadow on the flower below it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put some more of this darker greenish color. And I'm going to continue doing this just creating the shadow. Going around our petals in the foreground so we can tell that those are behind it. And I'm going to make sure I blend in these lines. I don't want any of these outlines showing. I want it to look like it's a coloring book, like it's outlined too much. I'm just blending in that green. Can you see? Just loosely blending that in. Adding more yellow where you need it. Doing the same thing. Just add a little bit here so that it doesn't stand out from the rest because it's all in the same flower. Go there. And I'm going to add some more darkness here because this is even further behind these flower petals. So we want to make sure that he is really in shadow. So I added quite a bit of blue, you can see there. And then I'm going to blend that in with yellow. You can see how dark that one looks. So we're going to put yellow and make sure he's really blended. Add some more yellow because he's looking pretty dark. We'll do the same thing for this one back here and that guy there because you want those to be even further back in the distance so that they're going to be darker in our painting. I'm going to blend some yellow. You can see I'm kind of wiping excess paint off my brush onto my paper towel in between. Make sure I'm not mixing too much. It helps me to control which paints are mixing together. There we go. Make him darker, and we'll do the same for this guy here. Make sure we blend out these lines there. So you just always kind of want to step back. Sometimes I find it helpful if I'm painting like this and I have lots of different planes going on and different shading and things like that. I'll hold my painting up and I'll set it somewhere and then I'll step back from it and look, and that'll oftentimes help for things to jump out that need to be corrected, things that don't look real or things that maybe look a little funny that it's hard to tell when you're painting up close to it. That's something that I do a lot when I'm painting. Or at the end, I make sure that I always kind of hold it up at a distance and make sure that it still looks as good as it looked when I was sitting down at the table. So I've got a lot of blue on my brush now, you can see. There's a lot of that navy, so I'm going to go ahead and wash it off because I'm going to go ahead and put some more yellow back into these top petals. So I've got my yellow, making sure I've got some navy in my pile of yellow, so I'm going to make sure I don't pick that up again. And I'm just going to brighten these up a little. So I'm kind of almost doing like a dry brush. I'm just touching the canvas very gently, going over this blue, this bluish green color, just to make these pop off the background petals again. We're doing lots of layers for these petals to make sure that they all look like they are sitting where they're supposed to be sitting in this painting. Okay. Maybe I'll add a little yellow here because it's looking kind of dark there. Okay. All right, so you can see now it looks a little more like these petals are in the distance and these petals are in the foreground. So we're going to go ahead and wash our brush off. So I can see now I have some, a little bit of white area still here, and I don't want that. I want to make sure all of my canvas is covered whenever I'm painting. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add another sort of layer of paint to this area. So I'm going to grab some of my daffodil yellow, and I'll pick up a little bit of orange again, and make sort of this warm, yellowy, I wouldn't say it's as dark as this one we did earlier. It's a little bit lighter than that. It's not quite that tangerine color. It's just a little bit warmer of a yellow. Just ever so slightly warmer than our original daffodil yellow color. And I'm just going to sort of add some more color in right up to the edges here, kind of redefining. You can add some more orange if you feel like you need it. Sort of redefining these edges up against the green. Okay, so you can see we're just adding a little bit more color to these petals just to make sure that they're really popping out from each other. I'm sort of cleaning up the edges of them using some of this yellow and orange mixture that I made just to make the yellow a little bit warmer. Just a tiny bit of pure orange to the daffodil yellow. And I'm just cleaning up these edges to make sure that these petals really pop. Not quite as orange as our sort of tangerine color we mixed earlier, just a little bit lighter. Just filling in with some more color. You can warm up these in the background a little bit. Now that our green is a little more dried, our green color, we wouldn't want to mix the orange and green together because that would get sort of brown, and that's not what we want. But we can, now that it's dry, we can go over it with this warmer color to warm it up a little for sure. I always find that the more steps you paint on something, oops, I got too much orange on there. The more steps and the more layers you add to a painting, generally the more realistic it looks. It takes a lot of different layers to make a painting look very real. Okay, I'm just blending in some of these areas that I painted. Okay, got a little fuzz on my canvas. All right. So now that we've added that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wash my brush off. Make sure I got all the yellow off because we're going to start painting with just pure navy blue for the background next. I want to make sure I have all that yellow, that daffodil yellow off my brush. Refresh my paper towels. Okay, so like I said, we're going to be using just our pure navy blue. So we're just going to start painting the backgrounds. We're just filling it in now. I'm doing sort of a dabbing motion because we're going to add another color into it in just a minute. But I'm going right around these petals. And you want to make sure you get a fairly clean line because we're not painting the petals anymore. So this is, however this looks, is how the edges of your petals are going to stay for the end of the painting. You can always fix them, of course, but we're not adding any more layers. So we're just going in and painting the background. And this is just navy blue. This is one of my favorite blues that we have in the Folk Art Acrylics line. Make sure we get those shapes, those petal shapes the way you like them. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to fill in this negative space with the navy blue. Filling in the background, this is navy blue, and we are still using our number 12 flat brush. We really haven't, since the beginning when we painted with that liner brush, we've really been using the same brush for the whole painting. I really like this flat brush. It's a really good size for paintings like this. Okay, and then I'm going to go kind of and fill in some of these areas, make them darker You can see I'm just going to go down a little bit further to kind of make those areas pop. You can see there's a little bit of white there, so I'm just going to sort of use the edge of my brush to sort of make that stand out a little more. Just some of the areas where the petals are meeting. And I'm going to do the same thing down here at the base. I'm going to make sort of a V shape between each of my petals just to make those petals stand out a bit more. And again, I'm just using the very tip of this brush. I've got a nice straight tip, and I'm just making sort of a V shape with the large part of the V facing inwards. And that just sort of gives it some more depth here around the base of the petals. Okay, so now I'm not going to, I'm going to do it up here too. Just to give it some more depth. So I'm not going to clean my brush off. I'm going to wipe it off a little bit. I'm going to put some aqua onto my palette. Make sure you see that. And I'm going to put some aqua toward the top here to make it look a little bit lighter. Like maybe there's some sun coming down or something, just to lighten up the background. I'm just dabbing it in. My navy blue is still pretty wet. If it's not, you can pick up some navy blue with it, but I've also got some in my brush that's helping it blend together. So I'm just dabbing the aqua in there to lighten it up, to give the background a little bit of depth as well. Just going right up to the petals, just dabbing it in. And then I'm going to add a little bit of aqua down here too, and I'm kind of fade it out into that blue. I'm just doing that dabbing motion, sort of a similar dabbing motion as we did to the centers of our flowers. I'm just going to sort of make it brighter at the top and then fade it down here. So it looks like behind the flowers, the aqua is really fading into the navy blue. Oops. There we go. And then our final step of the painting is we're going to add some highlights to our petals. That's the last step. So I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush off really well because I'm going to be putting some pure white highlights. Still using the number 12 flat. Get it nice and clean. I'm going to put some wicker white, folk art acrylic wicker white onto my palette, just where I've got some room. I'm going to make sure my brush is really dry. I'm going to pick up some of this wicker white and I'm going to do sort of a dry brush sort of technique just up towards the edges of these leaves, just to give it sort of a brightness, like maybe there's some light hitting our petals, just to give it even more dimension and more color. Oops, that's a lot. Blend that out a little. You can put a little yellow in if you feel like you got too much. Just really lightly, not a ton of white, just a little bit, sort of a dry brush technique to make those petals really pop. And I'm only going to do it at the tops of the petals in my flower that's in the foreground. Do a little bit here because this is where the light would be hitting them because that's the top of that flower. Just a little bit here and there. And that's it. That's our sunflower fields painting. That's the last step.
So Jessie, this looks great. Thank you so much. I love the navy and with the contrast to the yellow, and sunflowers are so big for spring, so everybody will be ready to go with their decor, hang this in your house. And we hope everybody enjoyed our Let's Paint Live watch party tonight. Like I said, we're doing it a little bit different, but we hope everybody enjoyed and loved seeing everybody's comments and likes. And we are going to be ready for March 5th with our spring palms. So Jessie's going to be teaching this on March 5th.
Getting ready for spring break.
Yeah, and we'll be back live, hopefully warmer weather also. Yep. And if you haven't already, click the link below if you don't have your supplies and go ahead and get your Let's Paint Live kit where we've put together 24 folk art paints. And Jessie's going to pick every month from that palette, select few paints, and we're going to do our painting with that. So you'll be all ready. Yep. It's a great thing to, buy for yourself, treat yourself, give as a gift, or it's great to have if you're hosting these paint night parties with your friends, then you can just pull your kit out and everybody will have their supplies. You'll just have to get your surface. Yep. So again, we will be live March 5th with our spring palms, and we hope to see everybody there. Check us out on plaidonline.com. Let's paint. Bye, guys.
Bye.